Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of Anime Audio Commentary. This episode actually marks the third complete year that I've been doing this podcast, and to celebrate that, I thought I'd do something special. You know, I've really enjoyed doing this podcast, watching things and talking about them, and I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed listening to them. So, without further ado, I'm going to be commenting on Ghost in the Shell. And if you'd like to watch along, then you can start watching now. So, I've heard a fair bit about this film in that it's good. You know, it's a seminal piece of cyberpunk fiction. But I've never watched it. I don't know much about the plot aside from that one scene everybody kind of knows where the main character attempts to tear the hatch off a tank and doesn't really succeed. The only other thing I really know is that there was a live-action film in about 2017 or thereabout with Scarlett Johansson in the lead role. And, it wasn't really well received. I recall people saying unflattering things about it like Ghost can't fit in the shell or pig in the blanket in regards to how Scarlett Johansson looked in the costume, which is to say, not very flattering. I mean, as far as I know, it wasn't really a good adaptation either. But, I don't know. I feel like most anime wouldn't really translate to live action, but what I've heard about Ghost in the Shell, maybe it could do. Hard to say, really. So I guess, as is the case with a lot of cyberpunk stuff, there's a bit of corporate espionage going on. Interesting. So, I already know that the Major here is basically entirely cybernetic in nature. I mean, she might have, an actual brain or something, but beyond that, she's just kind of a robot. So the idea that there's, static going on in her brain, that, I guess that people can measure that is a little unsettling for me. But, it's seemingly treated as normal. And I guess it makes sense, if she's operating as an agent of Section 6 or Section 9 or whatever. It would make sense that they would monitor her vitals, and in this case, I guess, brain waves, brain activity, stuff like that. It's probably a whole lot easier if you are mainly mechanical. Sensors and stuff like that can be built in. The monitoring systems can be integral. I do have to say, this is a rather beautiful film so far. And I mean, that's kind of what you expect, really. Anime films, generally speaking, have considerably better animation, but between that and maybe not realism, I guess it is intended to be more realistic rather than fantastical, even if it is speculative science fiction. I think the realism really helps sell it. And for that matter, the people do look realistic. They look like people rather than anime characters, so to speak. So already things are a bit sticky with international law and diplomatic immunity and stuff like that. They're mentioning big words like affidavit, which is a legal statement, I believe. But, seeing as how, good lord. Seeing as how presumably the Major just blew up that guy's head, she's none too concerned about affidavits. So this is one of those interesting things that the Major is able to essentially camouflage herself rather remarkably. And it's interesting that they mention it as thermoptic camouflage. Therm indicating to me, thermal. So presumably it can avoid infrared viewing, I think it is. That relies more on heat mapping. So this is a rather remarkable bit of stuff we're seeing. Presumably this is the Major herself, her body. And I guess when you think about it, making a human body from scratch that a human could use, and that would be, virtually indistinguishable from flesh and bone, like that's no mean feat. And even just animating it. One of the things I really like about anime, specifically old anime, is that when you have things like giant robots, they're animated by hand, but they were also done consistently. And that's kind of the hard thing, because physical mechanisms, those things are really consistent. They don't tend to deform or stretch or do anything like that unless something's really going wrong. So if you're trying to animate a physical mechanism like a drive shaft or an actuator or something, there has to be a fair degree of consistency between frames, and that's no easy thing to do. And then when you factor in all the details that comprise like a human body, like the musculature, the skeletal structure, and all those like little cables and wires, like that's it's certainly not nothing. And in fact, I would say it's rather a lot. Like, I have no real artistic talent. My drawing skills sort of plateaued at the age of 5, so, like, all this stuff is leagues beyond what I'm capable of. But I just can't help but marvel at it. I guess I'm kind of wondering, is what we're witnessing here meant to be sort of like the commissioning process? Because, I don't know if this is a spoiler or anything like that, but I was under the impression that the Major here, she was involved in a car accident or something, some sort of accident, and she was essentially given a full body prosthesis. So I'm wondering if this is sort of the commissioning of that body. I mean, to some degree, surely it can't be, because I was given to understand the accident happened when she was maybe not a child, but young, and this is definitely, like, an adult body here. Maybe this is something that happens anytime she gets, activated to go on a mission or something. For all I know, that could be the case. I mean, I'm really kind of going into this with only an expectation that it's highly regarded. I mean, I can infer things about the plot. If there's corporate espionage and assassination and stuff like that, I think we can assume that the plot's going to be pretty involved, but I don't know. There's a whole lot of missing information I don't currently have, and I'm excited to find out. I think it is worth noting that the Major, despite being, mainly cybernetic in nature, she was seemingly sleeping, so I'm wondering if whatever organic bits of her remain, presumably her brain, if, she still has the physiological need for sleep. I'm given to understand that we, using the term we colloquially, we don't have a good understanding of why the human body needs sleep other than sometimes we just get kind of sleepy. So I guess presumably if there were a way to get rid of the need for sleep, they hadn't done it in the Major. I think it's also worth noting, just offhand, that Major is a fairly high rank. She is, what would you call it? A commissioned officer. Which is to say, they have a fair bit of responsibility. And they're pretty high up in the chain of command. Alright. So there's, politics, reparations from one regime to another because of past atrocities, I guess. I mean, it seems like it's kind of flimsy reasoning, but there's no real way they can just sort of say no easily. Yeah, so that's kind of getting to the crux of the matter. This guy, he clearly has a plan of action for what he wants to do. Or maybe not a plan, but a goal, rather. But to make things politically expedient, he needs to manufacture a reason that the public will buy. I think that's a really neat way of, I guess, telling us, the audience, that all politicians are essentially scummy. You know, because the important thing is that the public won't get upset about it, rather than the morality of the action itself. So that's something, you know. Her brain was hacked by using a telephone line, and a hacker called the Puppet Master is seemingly behind this and at large. That's something, alright. So they're using the phrase ghost, and I was also given to understand that that's sort of like shorthand for soul, I guess. You know, like the ghost in the shell, the soul inhabiting the body. You know, the body may change, but the soul remains. But I guess it could also mean, in a more literal sense, like the operating system of her cyberbrain, as they mentioned. That's rather unsettling. Because, I mean, like, being hacked, like, that's... fundamentally, that would be like a loss of self, you know? Alright, so the Puppet Master, he's a real bad hombre, you know? He's doing all sorts of crimes, like, man. Yeah, so this guy's, he's asking the real questions here, you know, why would supposedly the greatest hacker in the world use outdated equipment? And, you know, the Major fobs it off as saying, like, using an older method would be harder to hack, but I'm not sure if that argument holds water, because, like, when you think about it, there are instances where low technology beats high technology. You know, suppose you have a door that requires, like, a 12-digit combination to open it, but if the door frame is weak, you know, you can just, like, break the hinges and get through the door that way, and it doesn't matter how secure the lock is. But considering he's using, like, hacking methods that are kind of outdated, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Because, well, it's all hacking. I guess I'm sort of betraying my lack of knowledge on programming and all that, but I don't know. I think it's kind of missing the forest for the trees. You know, this isn't like, Yeah, I'm struggling to think of an analog to hacking someone's brain similar to the door thing. Like, I guess it would be social engineering, sort of like befriending them, convincing them, rather than hacking their brain. Now that would be something, actually, if the Puppet Master were some sort of master social engineer. Huh. Now, I do like this sort of aesthetic, you know, because there's very clearly high technology, but there's so many places that are so dingy and disgusting, too. You know, and that's sort of like a fixture of cyberpunk, that there is technology, but everything's, you know, almost worse than before. And I think that's a very sort of interesting thing in science fiction, especially in things like, you know, Star Wars and Warhammer 40,000. You know, very clear the future, very clearly advanced technology, but it's also sort of like used and worn and, like, nearly decrepit almost. You know, I think it ends a sense of realism because, you know, when I look around at the world I live in, there are lots of things that are objectively technologically advanced, but also kind of worn and decrepit too. I mean, like, suppose you're driving around looking at the architecture, like, there's some old bridges that are starting to show their age, you know, cracks in the concrete and all that. But when you get down to it, like, a concrete bridge, like some of the stuff you see, like, you know, that's not something that could have been built 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Like, you know, it's interesting. So unfortunately, that's not much to go on. You know, they're trying to find this hacker, but I would feel like by definition a hacker would be hard to nail down just because they can operate remotely. You know, a hacker doesn't always have to be in person to do something. And I guess that's one thing, you know, the guy who's causing the delay, he might be, maybe not the culprit, but he might be involved. You know, he could be like the diplomat whose brain has been hacked. He might be operating at the behest of the puppet master, whether he knows it or not. And I guess this is sort of like the big issue that the Major and Section 6 are having to deal with. You know, the puppet master could be operating out of anywhere, and he could be using, you know, any one of who knows how many people as his agents or his proxies. Wow. You know, just looking at that scene as the Major drove down that off-ramp, like, you know, maybe it's not the most technically impressive scene, but there's just something about that. Like, it seemed rather realistic to me, and sort of like cutting off somebody in traffic getting honked at, like, man. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily praiseworthy as attention to details so much as it is, just displaying like a realistic outcome, but I don't know, that just kind of sticks with me. So this guy's got a family, and like a little cynical piece of me, I'm thinking that this probably doesn't bode too well for him. You know, I'm reminded of Maze Hughes from Full Metal Alchemist. You know, most of his appearances also involved him gushing about his family, and, you know, look what happened to him. Yeah, you know, I feel like if you're dealing with the Puppet Master, who is supposedly a renowned hacker, I feel like if you don't want to catch on, or rather, if you don't want him to catch on to you, you know, you really have to be pulling out all the stops. For the Major to just sort of access relevant information without using a backdoor, as that other cop said, you know, I feel like that's asking to be found out. But I guess, you know, not everyone can be a computer expert. Well, that's rather indiscreet to just sort of call out of the car and say, hey, they know. And I guess it's also rather indiscreet to start shooting, too. But I guess the idea is, you know, if you can kill your pursuers by getting the drop on them, why not? Now, something tells me that that firearm is rather souped up for it to provide so much recoil. Considering it's like, what, like a submachine gun? Yeah, so that's really something to destroy an armored vehicle like that. Like, I'm not sure that exactly meshes with reality, but I mean, this is cyberpunk. I'd be willing to believe that he's got some sort of like mass reactive bullets or something. Alright, so this is interesting in that the thermal camouflage, it's not something unique to the Major. You know, it might be sort of built into her body, but it's not something she has an absolute advantage on. Wow. So clearly her body is rather remarkable that she was able to scale a building like that. I'm wondering what other sorts of technological goodies she has. Presumably she's got some sort of like targeting system by which she could pick out her target in a crowd, but I mean, she might not be special in that regard. Like this guy here, he's clearly got something going on with his eyes. Whether they're prosthetics or just like futuristic sunglasses or something. I mean, that's kind of an interesting concept, because it's like, well, basically like two monocles, if that were the case. But I guess, seeing so when we see things from his view, it's sort of like a CRT screen almost. I think it's fairly reasonable to assume there's some degree of bionic implant there. I mean, at least good on the cop for having the trigger discipline not to fire into a crowd. You know, in cyberpunk fiction, there's generally sort of like this disregard for human life. But, I mean, it's not like he's not taking a shot at all. He is doing it, and there are bystanders around, but to not fire into a crowd, you know, that, if nothing else, I think shows for some consideration towards human life, even when it may not be warranted, because, you know, I think their highest priority is, well, probably not killing this guy. They probably wouldn't care too much if they do kill him, but catching him would certainly be better. You know, they can get information out of him that way. And unfortunately for him, it seems like his camouflage isn't working anymore. I'm wondering if that's because it caught like a stray bullet or something. Because I don't think he had really been shot, otherwise we might have seen a bit more to it, but it probably took like a glancing hit. Yeah, I'm wondering exactly what this guy's deal is, because surely he's got to be augmented somehow, but there's no, at least so far, no real clear distinction between who is and isn't augmented. I mean, for all we know, you could have like some sort of like wicked prosthetic arm that pops out like a little cannon or something. You know, something tells me that he didn't quite manage to shake the Major. Although, I guess in his position, being in the water is probably as good as it gets. You know, you can see ripples in the water, even if something is invisible. It didn't help him. You know, the Major clearly got the drop on him. But, oh, she also cast a shadow, too. I guess that would make sense, and that's probably a giveaway showing that camouflage isn't perfect. You know what? I appreciate that. Because, like, camouflage and all that stuff is cool, but, you know, there are, like, oh. Okay, so this guy, like, there's clearly something to him. But, what was I saying? Camouflage. You know, there are, like, real sort of camouflage technologies, and, you know, they're not perfect either. So it's nice to see a bit of realism. So I feel like, you know, despite this guy's insistent that he's not gonna talk. Oh, that's interesting. They don't need information from this guy, seemingly. Alright, this is an interesting wrinkle. You know, seemingly if this guy is a thrall of the Puppet Master, then he's basically excised everything from this man. I mean, that's gotta be a very tough pill to swallow, that you don't really know who you are anymore. So I guess, even if they can't get information out of this guy and they do take him alive, if nothing else, they can sort of confirm, perhaps, that he is a thrall of the Puppet Master. I mean, that may or may not provide any relevant information other than, it's happened. I doubt they could trace that guy back to him. Okay, so this guy, is a bit of a career criminal. Interesting. So he was involved with this whole embassy thing that they were trying to head off. Okay. So it seems like, like the Puppet Master's at work here. There's really no connection between him and the crime he was supposed to commit. Which, from the Puppet Master's perspective, that's probably your best bet, to get a bunch of people that can't be traced either to the crime you want them to commit or back to you. Yeah, I'm thinking Section 6 and the cops, if they're not the same thing. They probably have their work cut out for them. Wow. I mean, that's a pretty heavy thing to drop on a guy in interrogation. Your entire life as you know it is a lie. You don't have a wife, you don't have kids, and all that. Yeah. I feel like if they're implanted memories, it's probably very difficult to convince someone of the truth. Yeah, I can't help but feel bad for this guy, because, he's convinced of a reality that doesn't exist. And, just sort of, putting him through the ringer here by asking him for details that he can't produce. That's not good, man. And that's really unfortunate too. You can't really get rid of the fake memories. You can't get your real memories back, not in full. Man. That's rather spooky stuff. Not to get super existential, but what is a person if not a collection of all their experiences, which, get stored as memories? I mean, to some degree, you don't become an entirely new person if you're an amnesiac, but, something definitely changes for sure. Man. The brain is a very interesting thing, and I'm very happy to have mine in working order. I like being able to remember things about my life. Now, I'm guessing that the Major might have some questions about this at some point herself, too. Because if she really is just a brain in a robot body, well, how does she really know that she's not in the same sort of situation where her memories are fake? I mean, if you really are just a brain in a robot, how are you even sure that even that is the case? How do you know you're not, whole cloth made out of machines? I mean, I would think to some degree that's probably a question best left unanswered, just because, Well, I mean, just because ignorance truly is bliss sometimes. Yeah, now that is interesting. You know, the Major being a cyborg and scuba diving in her spare time. Yeah, you know, I'm not sure I understand this guy's line of reasoning here. It's like, you know, why are you scuba diving for fun? What if something goes wrong? I mean, yeah, what if something goes wrong? It doesn't matter if you're a cyborg or not, you're still sort of SOL. I mean, like, maybe a robot wouldn't suffer from the bends, but, I don't know, small consolation if you're stuck at the bottom of a lake or something. I mean, I guess, at the very least we can assume her body is watertight so as to not short out the electrical components. Yeah, I wonder what the Major's talking about here. That's interesting. An interesting sort of phenomenon where you feel like you're becoming somebody else as you rise up through the ocean. Yeah, I'm not sure I can relate to that. Yeah, you know, it seems unusual that the Major's getting so chatty. Or at least that's what I'm given to understand. So I guess the way the Major's talking, she's not the only one who's highly augmented. I mean, she's making an interesting point here, like, I'm not sure if I agree, personally, because she's saying, you know, like, if there's technology, Maine will use it. I mean, that's true. But she's saying, you know, like, we've upgraded basically everything we have. You know, who are we to complain if there's, like, a little bit of maintenance involved? I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion that you probably shouldn't hack off healthy bits of your body and replace them with other things. You know, like, it's one thing if you lose an arm in an accident and you get a prosthetic arm. By all means, go wild, but if you decide to cut off your own healthy, functional arm because you want a cool robot arm, that's not good. You know, I think that speaks to a self-destructive tendency. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. People probably shouldn't allow you to do that. Alright, so that's rather eerie. You know, a third voice speaking, but, I guess the question is who? You know, the obvious answer is that it might be the Puppet Master. And that he was speaking with the Major's voice, presumably, that doesn't bode well for all the technology in her body, you know. Because I guess, like, the one good thing about flesh and blood is that it's not controllable in the same way that machines are. Now, I think this is an interesting shot. It almost reminds me of Manhattan to a degree, like Times Square kind of, but I think it's pretty clearly meant to be part of Japan, considering, you know, all the writing and all that. But it's interesting that it's almost like Venice in that there are canals. You know, that isn't really a thing you see in many places. Like, Venice is the only city I know of that has sort of these canals that take the place of Rhodes. And I'm sort of wondering what the significance of that scene was. The Major on the boat, looking up, presumably seeing herself sitting in one of the buildings. You know, are we meant to understand that that's a doppelganger? Or this is some sort of hallucination, or that, you know, her body and appearance aren't unique? Because, like, I would imagine if something, God forbid, were to happen to me and I needed a full body prosthesis, like, you know, I would want my body to sort of resemble what I used to look like. You know, maybe I'd opt for some improvements here or there, but I think fundamentally I would want to look like myself. So, this begs the question, you know, is that the case with the Major? Does she no longer look like what she once did? And I feel like if that were the case, there has to be some sort of psychological impact. I mean, like, it's one thing to radically change your appearance if that's what you want to do and you're all on board with it. But at the same time, I feel like if it's the result of an accident, like, I don't know, it's a lot harder to cope with. You know, I have to say, this long stretch of just the bustle of the city going on, I feel like this is meant to be sort of reflective of the Major. Because that whole bit where she was scuba diving, she seemed to be more thinking about life than anything else. You know, it didn't seem like she particularly enjoyed scuba diving in and of itself. So, but it also seems to prompt, like, thoughts, I guess. Like, it allows her to think. So I'm wondering if this is sort of something like that, you know, giving the audience a little opportunity to think about what we've seen so far and consider the ramifications. That, or it's sort of, you know, the Major's thinking. I mean, there's certainly a lot to think about so far. So that's something. You know, generally it's not a good idea to just stand in the middle of the street. You know, you might be a cyborg, but even so, it's not advisable. So I guess the real question is, who is that woman? I'm wondering if this is sort of indicative of the damage, but like, when we hear things from her perspective, it's rather, distorted. Ooh. Alright, so clearly that car was none too kind to her, seeing as how she's missing a hand now. Oh, a couple, actually, it looks like. Yeah, I'm wondering what the significance of this is. Was she sort of, enthralled by the puppet master? Okay. Alright, so this is a literal, just cybernetic body. You know, a shell without a ghost, as it were, and it was manufactured entirely without instruction to do so. So, that's really something, you know. It would seem as though this is the puppet master. Although, for what reason he produced this body... Yeah, I don't know. Like, presumably he wants this as a disguise by which to kill somebody? Okay. So, many, many more questions, no real answers. I mean, Bato, I think that's his name, the cop, said that to pull off a hack like this, to get a corporation to produce a body without instructions or at least initially suspicion, like, that's, like, borderline impossible. So that's interesting. Okay. So there's a whole bunch more information here. You know, Bato is saying that he wouldn't be surprised if that thing had a soul, which, you know, I'm not sure I agree with, an entirely constructed thing. But, yeah, that's something. You know, I guess they're right to be concerned, considering that the Major's body was made by the same company. And, you know, if they are susceptible to being hacked, like, that doesn't bode well for her body. Yeah, I mean, like, Megatech, like, they should be on, like, you know, DEFCON 1 right now if they had been hacked, like, man, like, air-gapping all their systems, disconnecting from any possible means of ingress. Yeah, like, that would be bad. So now the Major's curious about that shell and whether or not it has a ghost. So I'm given to understand that a ghost is sort of like the digital impetus that can animate a body. And I guess seeing as how it was walking around, surely there has to be something, but I don't think a ghost, as they describe it, is the same as a soul. I don't know. I think everything's kind of vague deliberately, just to really make you think about it, but I guess the idea here is that the Major wants to confirm whether or not there is any, I guess, sapiens, and she's going to be diving in, which I assume to be kind of analogous to taking like a deep dive in Cyberpunk. Except, she's presumably going to be diving into the shell's mind. I mean, all told, that seems kind of like a dangerous thing, because you don't really know what's going to be in there. I mean, presumably nothing, but this is the Puppet Master we're dealing with, and he's a cunning individual. Okay. So, interesting. You know, the Major's wondering... Yeah, it makes sense that you would wonder if she really is truly herself. Yeah. And I think Bato's right here. It's like, you know, we treat you like a real person. Isn't that enough? And for all practical purposes, perhaps it is, but at the same time, I can understand why the Major's a little distraught about this. But I think her initial line of questioning was interesting. You know, do I look alike to that thing? Not in face, in figure, or in form, but like, you know, on a more metaphysical level. Yeah, so I guess, I feel like this is setting up the Major discovering something uncomfortable. Because, you know, she's worried about whether or not she is truly a real person, and I think, you know, we're all sort of fairly sure she is, but what if the thing she discovers within that shell is also very real, even though they know it isn't? You know, maybe like, functionally indistinguishable. Like, that would be a really rude awakening. I mean, imagine that. We're able to create something that is only distinguishable from human life if you know it's not human. Yeah, with all like the AI stuff going around these days, I'm wondering if this is a particularly timely film for me to watch. Okay. So I think this guy has sort of determined that maybe somebody was sneaking in. So this is kind of an interesting security system, that there would be pressure pads so as to track anyone and everyone going in and out of places. I mean, in addition to cameras and more conventional things. Ooh, that's interesting. So they assume that there are no cyborgs in Section 9, but considering they're weighing down the pressure sensors to nearly half a ton, it would seem like they are probably cyborgs. Or just a lot fatter than they look. And I guess there's also the issue of potential camouflage, which, like 3 fully grown men, surely they could add up to about half a ton, because that's like 500 pounds. If you have like 3 not quite fat guys at like 170 pounds each. Yeah, that checks out. So somebody has camouflaged their way in here, so it would seem. Now I do have to say, this is rather unsettling, because this shell here, if it does have some degree of sapience, like imagine how unfortunate it would be to be deconstructed to be basically like an upper torso and parts of your upper arms and a head. Like, I mean, at that point, you have like no mobility of any kind, really. So it seems like Section 6 and 9 have a bit of a pissing match between them over jurisdiction. Okay. So this is the work of the Puppet Master, and the Puppet Master has downloaded himself into this shell. So I'm not sure if the Major is supposed to be privy to this, but boy, this is informative. Okay. So this was all basically a plot. Oh. Oh, wow. Okay, so they lured him to basically copy his brain into a robot and killed him off. So he's literally just, well, nothing, really. I mean, he is a wandering soul. Oh. Okay. So, is the Puppet Master an AI, then? I mean, he claims to have never had a body before, so that would indicate... Yeah. Alright, yeah, so now we're getting into AI here. Like, the AI is sentient at this point and sapient, and it's claiming political asylum. I mean, I don't know if you could deny that outright. Wow. Yeah, the Puppet Master here has clearly put a lot of thought into what's going on. Yeah, I mean, like, the obvious answer is that, like, you're not actually alive, you're a program, but, like, man. Yeah, I guess that's the other thing, criminals don't get asylum, but, yeah, I don't know. Like, what are they gonna do about this guy? Because they can't just kill him outright. Okay. Alright, so I'm wondering if this is a distinction without a difference. The Puppet Master claims not to be an AI, but like a life form born of information. I'm wondering if he's just using flowery language. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of this other than this is entirely different than I had assumed it would be. I mean, I figured the Puppet Master would be a person. And I guess to some degree the Puppet Master is a person, but not a human, I guess, to be more precise. So I guess the question is, what do you do about this? Because he's making it pretty clear that he wants to live. He doesn't want to be killed. But clearly, for all the crimes he's committed, people aren't willing to just let him go about his own business. They can't kill him, and they can't necessarily just leave him alone considering the crimes he commits, so what do? I mean, I guess the best case solution would be to, like, live and let live, like, drop him off on an island and say, like, hey, you can live here, or something, but I don't know. Because, like, he also makes it pretty clear that he was a project, he was designed, Project 2501, so I'm wondering if he was designed to be a weapon, and if that's the case, to what ends was he created, as, like, a cyber bioweapon, I guess, for want of a better term. The idea that, they could win a sort of cybernetics arms race by having an artificial hacker. Alright. Man. So it seems like the issue here is that different government organizations are being shady with each other rather than working together. Yeah. So I guess they really have no choice but to send in the Major to do something. Ooh. Okay, I was wondering if this guy was gonna drop like a heavy secret or something. But I guess it makes sense. If you can't recover the Puppet Master safely, just destroy it. Which... probably the most reasonable thing to do. I mean, like, if the Puppet Master's been on, like, the most wanted list for doing all sorts of crimes as he was before, then surely you can't let him get back to doing that. Yeah, so these Section 6 guys, they clearly don't understand what's going on. And, I'm kind of with them. They're ascribing human motives to the Puppet Master where they may or may not apply. But clearly the Puppet Master is kind of human to a degree. Like, he doesn't he doesn't want to work at the behest of them, which is seemingly what they wanted, to a degree. Force him into a body and kill him that way, or just, kind of enslave him. Like, if he's this sort of ephemeral ghost, then it's much harder to wrangle, I guess I could certainly sympathize with the Puppet Master in that he just wants to do what he wants to do, to some degree. I guess it's just interesting that the situation has sort of devolved to the point where Section 6 and Section 9 are seemingly working at odds, even though they are presumably sections of the same thing, that being the government. It's also interesting that they're deploying all sorts of assets just to handle this. I mean, I don't know what they assume the Puppet Master will do, because, like, surely there's only so much he can do in his body. I mean, he also has tremendous hacking capabilities as he displayed, but, I don't know. Like, what exactly do they expect him to do? He's not going to commit some sort of atrocity, surely. I mean, if he's demanding asylum, then, it wouldn't help his case, Okay. So that Dr. Willis guy, he was heading up some sort of AI project. Okay. So there's all sorts of stuff going on here. Alright, so I guess the project that they say was intended to catch him was really just trying to recapture him. They created him, and then he went rogue, or, started doing his own thing. Yeah, that's interesting, but it's also kind of the case, really. The government creating something and it's sort of blowing up in their face. Yeah, I guess it makes sense that they kind of have to silence the Puppet Master. Because, like, imagine that, it leaks that you have essentially created a life form, and then you're treating it in a manner that is less than deserving of something with sapience. That's not good. I think people would be very right to be upset, which I think is a considerable understatement. Alright. So there's some sort of exchange going on here, presumably trying to throw off people through analog means. That's an interesting expression, whisper in your ghost, meaning like a sneaking suspicion, I gather, or like intuition. Yeah, I don't know. I would think, like, if you're just sort of like hearing things, if you were to describe it that way, I would think that's more indicative of something not good rather than intuition. So I guess the question is, where is the Puppet Master's body really? And I'm thinking, the Major's probably on the right trail. Even if accidentally. So I guess it's nice that these Section 6 guys, they've got more resources, although something tells me that this guy was just sort of like suddenly pulped. That might be a bit excessive, you know, they probably didn't have to do that so bloodily, but man. You know, there really is like a fair degree of heart-stopping violence in this. And I guess what makes it so effective is how realistically it's animated. I mean, to see that guy's ribs like that, like, ugh. I like my ribs where they are. So I guess the only question is, you know, we need to follow up with the Major now. She's chasing that white sedan. And seeing as how the other one ended, maybe not anticlimactically, but abruptly, I feel like things are going to be significantly more involved with the Major. Especially seeing as how she seems so anxious to get stuck in. You know, going in blind and going in a hurry, usually not a good thing. I mean, there are instances and cases where there's only so much you can do, but yeah, I feel like rushing into a firefight is never a good idea. Alright, so I think we're getting near that scene that everybody knows. Just based off of like a clip I saw on YouTube and just sort of like the general location the Major's in now. Yeah, here we go. So that's a rather hectic level of weaponry. I mean, it is a tank, really, and it's also got camouflage, which is especially dangerous. I mean, fortunately, it seems like just falling planes of glass were enough to make it visible, but yeah, I mean, the pilot's making a good point here. Like, what are you going to do against a tank? I mean, sure, this is your last chance to get the Puppet Master, but and I guess the Major also has an alternative motive here. You know, she'll treat it as a bargaining chip. You know, she wants to know the truth here about herself, presumably. And having the Puppet Master's leverage, like, that might be what she needs. But there is the wider issue that Bato brought up that, you know, like, what are your weapons going to do against tank armor? Not much. And looking at the tank, actually, I'm wondering if that's CG. It does kind of look like it, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they did use CG for something like that, just because it's a rather complex mechanism. Maybe it was only CG in that shot, or maybe it was like... Maybe it's like weird shading or something. I don't know. It doesn't look bad. Like, I'm not complaining. It is also an interesting design, you know, it's sort of like spider-like. It traverses on many legs rather than on treads. But yeah, man, I'm not really sure what the Major can do, because she is sort of evading it for the time being, but it's also seemingly chewing through reinforced concrete with astonishing rapidity. You know, I don't know what the Major can really do if she runs out of convenient hiding places, you know? It's like one bullet's probably gonna do it for her. Probably rather messily, too. Yeah, so it seems like things are really not good, because there might be reinforcements and they're probably not on the Major's side. I mean, she's already pinned down by this tank. And I guess the interesting thing is, like, we don't really know, like, what the deal with the tank is. Like, I guess I had always assumed it was automated, and that seems to be the case to a degree. that little targeting reticule, you know, it wasn't showing like somebody watching it and following after the Major. But, you know, as seemingly intelligent the tank is, it doesn't seem to be on the same tier as the Puppet Master. And I guess its automatic systems probably aren't perfect either, and I'm thinking that's what the Major's banking on. You know, if she can turn herself invisible with that camouflage, then she can sort of hopefully get the drop on it. So that was probably an act of misdirection. You know, that grenade just happened to kill that other guy, but it also misdirected the tank. And this is probably a bit of a design flaw on the tank's part, you know. It doesn't seem to have any weapon systems on the top that would dislodge an attacker trying to pop the hatch. Although that said, you know, despite this impressive feat of strength, the Major doesn't really have the bodily integrity to pop the hatch. I mean, like, imagine for a second doing anything with your body that would cause it to fail mechanically like that. Like, it beggars belief. Like, surely she would have stopped before it got to that point if this weren't so important to her. Oh dear. I mean, this is rather lucky that Bato showed up. I was gonna say, this is the end. Like, that thing's clearly attempting to crush her skull. And, you know, it was mentioned her skull's titanium and therefore probably pretty darn durable, but if there's a real brain in there, it doesn't take much deformation to become a real problem. Man. It's interesting that the Major's still capable of, well, doing much of anything, really. I mean, they sort of talk without speaking, but, man. So the Major really doesn't want to wait at all. You know, she's diving in. And I guess that makes sense. You know, if there's something important here, she wants to get her hooks into it, just in case it'll give her leverage. But, ooh. Oh, that's interesting. So for these guys, whoever they are, presumably Section 6, not only is the Puppet Master a target, but the Major is too, because, so far as I can tell, they share a similar make and model of body. I guess the idea being that they would be worried the Puppet Master could hop from one body to the other, if sufficiently provoked or given the opportunity. You know, it's probably not an unfounded fear, but I think to sort of, to just, like, make it clear over the comms that, like, hey, kill this person on sight, that probably wouldn't bode well if it came to light. Yeah, you know, I'm very curious as to what it's going to be like. Like, because you're essentially diving into somebody else's brain to see what's going on in there. And I feel like there's a lot of room for artistic license. Although, it seems like it's more like just hopping into that body to see what's going on. Okay, so they've switched bodies, almost. I guess I sort of naively assumed there'd be, like, a scene of them, like, sitting together in a room talking or something. But I guess not. Wow. You know, that is rather unfortunate for the Puppet Master that sapience was considered to be a defect, and that, you know, they wanted to prune it. Alright. That's another wrinkle. You know, the Puppet Master was after the Major. And I guess I can only assume it's because they have, nifty bodies. Alright. Man, it's weird to think that he's been targeting the Major. Not targeting, but, you know, looking for her, trying to get her attention. Yeah, you know, I do certainly sympathize with the Puppet Master here, because he's aware, but, you know, he understands that he really doesn't have the full range of, I guess, what human beings would consider essential to being a life form. Yeah, that's something. To be able to want to create offspring and do all that business. I mean, clearly, the Puppet Master isn't going to get the sexual gratification out of it, but... You know, I can certainly understand the biological impulse to reproduce, even if biology doesn't strictly apply to an artificial intelligence. Okay. So they merge. You know, this really does remind me of Deus Ex, the old video game. There was something similar in that where basically the main character merges with an AI. And it seems like this is what's going on here. The Major and the Puppet Master, or rather the Puppet Master wants to merge with the Major so as to become a more complete life form. I mean, I guess if that's, like, the best approach to getting what he wants, it's understandable, but what does that mean for both of them on an individual level? I mean, they'd be inhabiting the same body, but, like, is it two consciousnesses in one body, or is it, like, shuffling a deck of cards where you sort of, like, interlace them and put them back together? Like, what's the deal here, you know? Will the Puppet Master still be the Puppet Master? Will the Major still be the Major? Yeah. I mean, I guess this whole thing is compounded further by the fact that there are snipers taking aim. You know, this is a really dangerous situation to be in, where they're sort of talking about life and death merging and all that. And there's also the very real threat of death. And I guess the Puppet Master is right to a degree. You know, human beings change all the time. Perhaps not to this radical degree that he is insisting upon, but... Man. So I guess the Major was kind of right in asking about that body. You know, does it look like me? Maybe not in form or in face and figure, but something beyond. I mean, even if Bato didn't understand what she meant, the Puppet Master certainly thinks the same way. Man, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. Like, would the Major go through with this? Because, you know, there is still that question about, like, will I be the same person? And obviously the answer is no, but to what degree will you differ? I mean, I guess it's kind of immaterial now that they've all been blasted rather messily. So, the Puppet Master's body, like, that's pulped, but the Major, it's unconfirmed. I mean, it seemed to me that the head had been detached, and I guess if they don't destroy the brain, then, the Major is still alive. I guess the question is, you know, is the Puppet Master in there too? Are they all safe and sound? I mean, safe and sound, that's probably not a concept that applies. You know, I'd imagine they're in a rather critical situation, but maybe not so much as a normal biological person having been decapitated. So I guess the question now is, will the Major recover, and if so, will she still be the Major? Where does the Puppet Master fit in all of this, and are they now one consciousness merged together? I guess there's also the business of having to reconstruct the Major a new body. You know, that's probably no mean feat either, considering that the company that did it had been hacked and they were presumably on a heavy lockdown. Okay, so I guess this is the Major, but she's clearly a child, so I'm guessing, was she just put into a different body, or is this the incident? Okay. Huh. Wow, okay. Black market prosthetic body. Man. So I guess it makes sense that the whole thing's being sort of hushed up as a terrorist attack rather than what was really going on. You know, an internecine squabble in the government. Yeah. So I guess the question is, you know, what's left here? You know, like, is this actually the Major? Because, like, based off of presumably the different vocal cord unit in the body, it sounds different. Oh? Okay. She sounded different before, or she sounds the same now? Okay. So I guess, you know, that scene on the boat was important. Alright. So yeah, I guess it did happen, you know. This new entity is neither the Major nor the Puppet Master, but a third new thing. And I guess this sort of leaves everything open-ended. Like, what is, I mean, I guess I'll call her the Major because that is her rank, but what's the Major going to do now? Yeah, like, the Major at this point is truly unique, being constituent of a biological life form and an artificial life form. They can essentially exist on two planes of reality, both the physical world and the internet. I'm wondering almost if this is sort of like the genesis of a new species. Wow. You know, that was certainly something. I'm not entirely sure what to make of all of this, but it was definitely intriguing. I also know that it's based off of a manga that I think I might have to read now, just for fun, just to see if there's like a little bit more information, because I could have sworn there was some explanation for why the Major is the way she is, but none of that was present here. Yeah, you know, I'm almost a little disappointed that it took me as long to get around to watching this as it did, because, I've known about the film for quite a while. I just, never decided to sit down and watch it. I might have to watch this again just to sort of crystallize some of my thoughts on it. But thinking about it, it was definitely a very visually appealing film. There's definitely like a plot there that, makes sense, it's coherent and all that. I feel like I would probably benefit from a second watch through just because, talking and watching at the same time, sometimes I miss things. But I think I've got the gist of it here. The soundtrack was kind of interesting too. Like, it's very, maybe ambient isn't the right word, but it's not like traditional music, I guess. I think it definitely suits it. I don't know. I might have more to say about this film once I watch it again. I feel like there's definitely parallels you can draw to life as we live it now. Yeah, I'll probably have to look into other Ghost in the Shell stuff too, because I'm pretty sure this isn't the only film. There are definitely more, and there are probably OVAs here and there. I think there are a couple OVA series. I don't know if there's anything like strictly broadcast anime, but might be worth looking into. I guess the big question is, if there's more, does it take place before this or after this? Because I could kind of see it going either way. There's a story to tell one way or the other. The Major and all of her actions up until this point, or, the entity that was created afterwards and what it does from here on out. Although, thinking about it, I did mention Deus Ex earlier, and I'm wondering if perhaps Deus Ex was instead inspired by this, because I believe this movie came out first, and, the source material for it preceded it even earlier. Deus Ex came out in, 1999. And, this thing doesn't have a monopoly on AI merging with human beings, but it's definitely striking. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.